The theory of utilitarianism, in simple terms, is a moral theory that argues that our moral actions should be judged for being right or wrong based on whether they improve or decrease our utility, or what we would call well being. As a consequentialist ethical theory, it focuses on the result and outcome and the level of benefit to determine whether it is morally right or wrong. In the mind of utilitarian, it is their goal to make their life better by increasing the good things in their life and getting rid of the bad ones, such as happiness and pleasure being the good ones and bad things being, let's say, pain or unhappiness. While those aren't the only good things and bad things to add and reject in your life, this theory can be also applied to complex choices and decisions as well, and controversial moral questions as well. I think the best way to show this is the trolley problem. We know the trolley problem is the train going down a track that will, if it stays on the path that it is, it'll kill five people, or it can divert and kill one person. As a utilitarian, they would divert the train to where it only kills one people instead of five people, and this would most likely be their reasoning. The level of pain than suffering, both physically and emotionally, would be much lower if we diverted the track and killed one person rather than five people. And if we then have to multiply that by five people, logically, the level of utility lost would be much higher with five people rather than one person. Ultimately, the morally right and wrong choice under utilitarianism is that decided by the consequences and actions and what produces the best results in terms of utility and maximizing well-being. Utilitarianism adopts parts of hedonism as its foundation, which states that the only thing that is valuable intrinsically and makes a good life is one filled with pleasure and absence of pain. Now, when pleasure is mentioned, one may think physical pleasure, such as like a warm shower or like the taste of something good, but there's also a higher level or like a complex more level of pleasure itself, which hedonism calls attitudinal pressure, which is enjoyment and is a much more complex form. Uh, there's concern in determining whether what is good and the action is right, because what happens when the actions you take lead to unforeseen circumstances. However, this objection can be shut down with when we ground it in reality. Let's say someone was being stabbed and we saved that person from being stabbed from some murderer. And then it turns out that that person we saved actually just ends up becoming like a serial killer. Well, obviously, we couldn't see the circumstance in which that would happen. And it's not realistic to then not do anything that's increase maximizes our well-being because of possible unforeseen negative circumstances. And once you ground it in reality, it's better to see utilitarianism in the view that the consequences you do are foreseeable and you can predict. And based on that, what choice would you make to maximize your well-being? Utilitarianism does have some objections, with the first one being like evil pleasures, like persuading someone to do things like drugs, whatever. Um, and it is increasing their well-being, but it has a negative effect on other people. So is it still maximizing well-being in a way? Utilitarianism would argue that whether the pleasure or happiness comes from a source of evil deeds and not morally right actions, it is equal to something that would be good, and they hold the same value. Or another objection would be, let's say this woman is married to her husband, and another situation where the woman's married to her husband and she's happy, but her husband is cheating on her. Um, One question, well, I mean, her source of happiness and her gain of pleasure is based on false beliefs. Again, hedonism and utilitarianism would say that it doesn't matter whether it comes from a bad source or a good source. They both are equal in value and provide the most benefit. Now, I would disagree that following this path with such rigidity is bad, because ultimately, is it really giving you a good life if it's based on something that isn't true? I think it goes to show that being happy isn't the only part of well-being. I know when we think of well-being, we think of happiness as like one of the key indicators, but it shows that like we can't base our source of happiness and maximizing our well-being on how happy we are. And there's a lot more other factors that we must consider. A life grounded in false beliefs will always produce less utility than the truth, and your well-being won't be approved to its potential than if you were to go the truth. The consequences of one's actions are ultimately decided about how better off and the level of pleasure and the absence of pain they gain, and utilitarianism does its best in its case to provide that understanding through a realistic perspective.